On the morning of March 14, 2022, Claire Whitfield sealed an envelope. It was not a large envelope, manila, standard size. It weighed less than a pound. Inside that envelope were 47 pages, 6 bank statements, 2 forged signatures, and the end of her brother's life as he knew it. She did not mail it that day. She waited. She waited until her mother's funeral was over, until the flowers had died, until everyone had gone home and forgotten. And then she walked to the post office and ended everything. The house on Miller Street was not a mansion. It was a 2-story colonial in Ridgewood, New Jersey, built in 1953. 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen with yellow wallpaper that Helen Whitfield had put up herself in 1981. Helen raised 2 children in that house, Claire, the older one, born in '67, and David, born in '71. Their father left when David was 4. Helen never remarried. She worked at the same hospital for 31 years. She paid the mortgage alone, every single payment, for 30 years. That house was not just a building. It was proof that one woman, alone, with no help, could hold a life together. By 2019, Helen was 79. She had been diagnosed with early-stage Alzheimer's the year before. The disease was slow, but certain. She knew what was coming, and she wanted to make sure the house, her house, went to both of her children equally. She hired an attorney. She had a will drawn up, 50-50, Claire and David, equal. That should have been the end of the story, but David had other plans. Everyone in Ridgewood loved David Whitfield. He coached Little League. He organized the block party every 4th of July. He brought groceries to his mother every Sunday. And he made sure the neighbors saw him doing it. Claire lived 4 hours away in Hartford. She was a forensic accountant for an insurance company. She visited when she could, which was not as often as David reminded everyone. Claire doesn't visit enough. That is what David told the neighbors. That is what he told his mother's doctor. That is what he told the attorney when he asked for a meeting alone. In November of 2020, David Whitfield walked into the office of a new attorney, not the one Helen had used, and presented a revised will. This version left the house entirely to David. Claire's share was reduced to a set of silverware and a photo album. The signature at the bottom read, Helen M. Whitfield. Helen was 80 years old. Her Alzheimer's had progressed to the point where she could not remember the day of the week. But according to this document, she was lucid enough to disinherit her own daughter. Claire found out about the new will 3 weeks after her mother's death. The attorney sent her a copy, standard procedure, no phone call, just paper. She read it at her kitchen table in Hartford. She read it 3 times. And then she sat there, in silence, for an hour. Her mother had died on January 9, 2021. Claire had not been able to visit during the final months, COVID restrictions. The nursing home had locked down. David had power of attorney. David made the decisions. David was there. Claire was not. She never got to say goodbye. And now, she was reading a document that said her mother, the same woman who had called her my baby girl until the very end, had decided Claire deserved nothing. Claire did not cry. She did not call her brother. She did not hire a lawyer. She opened her laptop. She was a forensic accountant, and forensic accountants do not yell. They do not accuse. They do not threaten. They find proof. Claire started with the attorney, the new one, the one David had used. She requested records under the Freedom of Information Act. She pulled his disciplinary history. She found 3 prior complaints, 2 of them involving elderly clients with diminished capacity. He had been warned twice, and he had done it again. Next, Claire pulled her mother's bank records. She had been named on the account years earlier, in case of emergency. The bank gave her access. What she found was systematic. Over 18 months, David had withdrawn $64,000 from Helen's savings. Small amounts, never more than $5,000 at a time, always cash, never documented. But Claire was not done. She requested copies of the mortgage documents. The house had been paid off in 2003, but in 2020, a new lien appeared, a home equity loan, $40,000. The signature on the application was Helen's, but the notary's name matched the same attorney David had used for the will. Claire had worked insurance fraud cases for 15 years. She had seen shell companies. She had seen offshore accounts. She had seen executives hide millions. This was amateur hour. Her brother had not even tried to be clever. He had just assumed no one would look. Claire ordered one final piece of evidence: her mother's medical records from 2020. She compared them to the dates on the documents. The will had been signed on November 12th. The home equity loan was notarized on November 19th. According to Helen's neurologist, on November 10th, Helen had scored a 12 out of 30 on a cognitive assessment. She could not identify the current president. She could not subtract 7 from 100. She could not remember her own address. But 2 days later, she had allegedly signed a legal document changing her entire estate. Claire had her proof. She did not call the police immediately. She did not send the file to a lawyer. She printed everything, 47 pages. She organized it into sections. She wrote a cover letter, and she placed it all into a manila envelope. Then she waited. The funeral was held on January 22nd. It was a small service, quiet. David gave the eulogy. He called Helen the strongest woman I ever knew. Claire sat in the third row. She did not speak. She did not cry. She watched. And when it was over, when the flowers had been laid and the guests had gone home, she drove to the post office. 6 weeks later, David Whitfield was arrested at his home in Ridgewood. The charges filled 2 pages. The attorney was disbarred 3 months later. He did not contest it. David's wife filed for divorce before the trial began. She had not known, or so she claimed. Either way, she took the children and moved to her sister's house in Maryland. The house on Miller Street was placed in a trust. The proceeds were split according to Helen's original will, 50-50. Except David's half went directly to paying his legal defense. David Whitfield took a plea deal. 3 years probation, full restitution, a felony record that will follow him for the rest of his life. He moved to Pennsylvania. He does not coach Little League anymore. Claire kept the house on Miller Street. She did not sell it. She did not rent it out. She drives down from Hartford on weekends now. She sits on the porch with a cup of coffee and she watches the street, the same street her mother watched for 40 years. She never gave an interview. She never posted about it. She never confronted David publicly, not once. Someone once asked her how she did it, how she stayed so calm through all of it, how she could sit across from her own brother at their mother's funeral, knowing what she knew, and say nothing. She said, "My mother kept this house standing for 30 years by herself. The least I could do was keep it standing for her." The house on Miller Street still stands. The yellow wallpaper is still there. And every Sunday morning, if you walk past, you can smell coffee from the porch. Some people protect what they love with force. Some protect it with noise. Claire Whitfield protected it with a spreadsheet and one envelope. If this story made you feel something, subscribe. Every week we tell a new story about someone who was wronged, underestimated, or betrayed, and who found a way to make it right. Tell me in the comments, would you have mailed that envelope? And if you want another story you will not be able to stop thinking about, it is already on your screen.